Hello and welcome to Dialogue. I'm Yang Rui in Beijing. Turkey has demanded that Germany prosecute a satirist who performed a poem on German television which targeted Turkey's President Erdogan and deliberately breached free speech rules. The German government has launched an inquiry into the broadcast, which came in response to a previous Turkish complaint about a German satirical song that had also targeted President Erdogan. The broadcaster says it would defend the satirist, but has removed the video from its website. Is Germany bowing to outside pressure? Should something deliberately offensive be defended as free speech? And what will be the outcome of this controversial international spat that mixes the views of governments, broadcasters and private individuals? To discuss these issues and more, I'm happy to be joined here in the Beijing studio by Mr. Frank Xiaorong, correspondent for Handelsblatt, and Mr. Feng Zhongping, Vice President of the China Institute for Contemporary International Relations. But before we begin our discussion, let's take a look at this.
Herzlich willkommen in der Drehscheibe Internet, das ASCII-Zeichen der Woche, die
This German TV host may be prosecuted for reading a crude poem about the Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Jan Bokerman, a comedian and writer known for his acerbic style, read the poem that poked fun at the president on March 31st on his satirical talk show Neo Magazine Royale to illustrate what he said wouldn't be allowed in Germany. The case didn't come out of the blue. Last month, Turkey summoned Germany's ambassador to complain about a satirical song that also targeted Turkey's president, which was aired by a rival satire program on another channel. Now Turkey has made a formal request for criminal prosecution of the comedian. Germany's criminal code states, "Whosoever insults a foreign head of state shall be liable to imprisonment not exceeding 3 years or a fine." However, it stipulates that such offences are only prosecuted if the country in question seeks prosecution and the German government allows it. Chancellor Merkel agreed the poem was deliberately offensive, but she made it clear Germany wanted to find a solution to the migrant crisis, but this was separate to artistic freedom.
I want to stress again what was stressed yesterday. We have the fundamental values in the Constitution, and that includes Article 5, which is the freedom of opinion, freedom of science, and of course, the freedom of art. Art and these fundamental values are valid regardless of any political problems we discuss with each other, and that includes the refugee issue. And I think Turkey and the European Union, and so also Germany, have an interest in finding a political solution on it.
It remains to be seen how Merkel will deal with the Bocherman case, which indeed comes at an awkward time for her.
Well, gentlemen, what do you think would be the most likely outcome coming out of this current spat between the two governments, Germany and Turkey?
I think this guy will not end up in prison for sure. That's probably...
Are you citing Article 5 of your constitution to protect the freedom of speech?
Yes, that's one side. On the other side, we have laws that you cannot offend other people, especially not head of states. And so we are talking about two conflicting laws, and now we need a very good judge to find a solution.
And perhaps a very expensive lawyer to be paid.
Yes.
What do you think of the outcome that might come out of the current quarrels between the two governments?
Okay, as Frank said, there will be no concrete, there will be no punishment. But I think, for Turkey to push hard to do something, it's very important. Then they may want to get what they want to get. To say this guy was punished, to either to pay a fine or put into the prison. But this is not decided by the Turkish.
But I'm afraid you guys have underestimated the sophistication of this case and may have oversimplified the whole stuff. For example, what do you think of a likely apology coming out from this guy, Bocherman?
Just a few hours ago he was saying, I was right doing this.
Look at the consequences arising from the satirical magazine Charlie Hebdo in Paris. I mean, the assault was obviously condemned by the whole world because it's a terrorist attack. However, we were discussing limits to freedom of speech. Don't you think absolute freedom of one's speech means the absolute insecurity of others?
I don't think there is absolutely 100% freedom of speech. especially I think European countries should be very careful in this critical moment of the terrorist attacks. You have to be very careful in dealing with countries with different religions, countries with different political culture. In this case, it's definitely Turkey's political culture is hugely different from other cultures in Europe. So there is definitely a matter of accessibility. I think we should remember.
However, there is a powerful message that is implied in what he says about the outcome. For example, it's how you look at the relationship between two conflicting laws in Germany. On the one hand, heads of overseas states should not be insulted anyway. On the other hand, the freedom of speech is safeguarded by Article 5 of German Constitution. But what about the ongoing investigation that is being authorized by the German government to figure out whether what the satirist has said has violated the law about avoiding, criticizing and assaulting head of overseas
But basically,
government.
the investigation only can be about the political implications. It can't be
Come on,
about
what do you mean
the
by political implications? This is a highly politically charged
there are two countries
debate.
involved which are right now are on the way to solve a very big problem in Europe. So this has political implications. But the politician, the Chancellor Merkel, she can't be a judge. She can't do the lawyer's work. This is something completely different.
Legally, she's not a judge, of course, but she might be a kind of arbitrator on political matters. For example, if you look at the ongoing negotiations between the European Union and Turkish government about whether more refugees or asylum seekers should be deported from Greece to Turkey, which already accommodates up to 2 million refugees from the volatile region of the Middle East. So what do you think will be the consequences? Should such an appeal by the Turkish government to prosecute the satirist be rejected?
This is exactly the consequences that I think German government, German Chancellor should remember in her mind. On the one hand, you could say, look, we have a tradition, principles for free speech, whatever. On the other hand, political reality demands German government to not to make the Turkish less helpful, make less helpful in dealing with the migration issues. This is the most urgent thing as far as Germany government is concerned.
But the most important thing is that Merkel has to make clear that this is a private opinion of this comedian. It has nothing to do with politics. So he was not asked by Merkel to do this, and he's not part of the political establishment. So actually it would be very smart to distinguish this event from the actual political development.
Come on, he is a private individual, but he is also a public figure. A public figure must be aware of whatever liability he or she faces if you decide to log on the internet or whatever. Now, the next question is whether Turkey will be rejected by the European Union for not tolerating the alleged human rights, because President Erdogan, let's look at the broad background against which this event took place. He is first of all laughed at by a satirical song, and then this guy, the satirist on the ZDF, the public funded television channel, read out the poem, a satirical poem again. And all these two events were directed at President Erdogan, who was accused of violating human rights, who was accused of suppressing the civil liberties, for example, of Kurds. Now, in this case, what do you think would be the response from the European Union as a whole towards the prospect that Turkey might one day be admitted to the European Union as a full-fledged member?
You say this is exactly something which I think the committee and the television was to broadcast. The whole event must have something background. There is a long story about the relations between European Union and Turkey. Turkey has applied for the membership of the European Union much earlier than the Central and the Eastern European countries. But Turkey has never got this serious admission or negotiation about the membership. Why? religion is probably one. Secondly, a lot of people in Europe do not think Turkey has qualified in terms of human rights, in terms of freedom of speech, etc. Being a member of the European Union. So this is a whole, this event will enhance, will start to make a lot of people to think about again whether Turkey is a qualified candidate one day be admitted into the European Union.
And a lot of people don't like that Europe in some ways now depending on Turkey solving the refugee problems,
yes.
the migrant problems. So there is a certain, how would I say it? A certain reservation against Turkey and against working together with Turkey. But this doesn't mean that you have to do this kind of poems, on the other hand.
But one issue that is crucially important for the European Union to push back the tidal waves of asylum seekers is how to process the asylum application. I mean, you have to build up one layer after another to cushion the impact of asylum seeking. And I believe the consequences are very serious. I don't want to discuss why President Obama said in an interview with Fox that the biggest mistake he made was the military intervention in Libya that led to the ouster of Muammar Gaddafi. Let me bring you guys back to the discussion about membership of Turkey, whether he's going east or west.
I think Turkey, a lot of people would like to join the European Union, but in recent years, Turkey thought this process was too long, too slow, and a lot of people are actually thinking about look east. But fundamentally, I think people think, many people, especially elites in Turkey, believes they are part of Europe. So I think they would like to be considered as a part of Europe. However, okay, going back to this whole issue, controversial issue, I think we need to distinguish between the government of Europe, European Union, or German government, for example, and the Republic of Europe. I think many people consider this issue through the public's perspective, but for people like Chancellor Merkel, for President of France, they look at the whole issue in different angle. They would think about how to deal, for example, with the refugee crisis. They will think about this is a priority. The speech of freedom is less important. It's important, but compared to this, it's less important.
Come on, this is politically incorrect to say that the human rights is not an important issue for audiences in European Union.
Urgent.
Frank,
less urgent.
You are a representative of the European audience about the issue of human rights.
I'm mostly representing myself, and I can't represent all the audience. But I would say for the politicians in Europe right now, the most important thing is to work with Turkey as close as possible together, without having Turkey becoming a member of the European Union, because I think right now it's quite unlikely. This is the idea of, I would say, most of the politicians in Europe right now. And actually Turkey itself more and more gets the idea to be an ankle between the West and the East, to be the country which is basically in between and which is balancing probably both of those big powers.
Perhaps Germany is also a bridge and a power that balances the United States and Russia. It balances the European Union and Russia. It also balances Asia and Europe. So Angela Merkel does face a daunting challenge as to how to act as a qualified politician, and a kind of a charismatic populist leader in continental Europe. But given the fact that Turkey is badly needed at this defining moment in seeking a solution to the asylum seekers, some kind of things will have to come up as a compromise. Do you think some kind of prosecution will have to be pursued to ease the anger of President Erdogan?
I think Chancellor Merkel has already started, German authorities have already started the preliminary inquiry before the formal demand from the Turkish government. But by doing this, I think partly, I think German government this is a gesture to try to smooth the process, try to maybe to reduce the tensions between the two countries. But Turkey will definitely, from its point, its part, they definitely want to push on this issue.
But again, she can't be the judge. If this guy will be prosecuted or not, that's the decision of a judge.
You're right.
What Merkel can do, she can probably offer Erdogan something else, or she can find a way to calm him down, to make him more easygoing again. But that's the only solution for her. She can't call the judge and tell him what to do.
Well, perhaps a dinner. A dinner is badly needed for President Erdogan.
The core of this controversial, I think Yang Rui has mentioned at the very beginning, is whether this is because according to German law, we talked about this two conflicting law. According to German law, it's illegal to insult a representative of other countries.
But there's freedom of speech as well. So you have two conflicting laws. That's the biggest problem in a rule of law, that you always have conflicting laws. Otherwise, you would need judges.
That is why I ask a question as to the legitimacy of membership of the Turkish government to be admitted to the European Union. If you refuse to accept this as a protection of human rights, then most likely you'll be rejected further by the European Union for having such a membership. You are watching Dialogue with Frank Sheeran and Mr. Feng Zhongping. We're discussing whether a German satirist will be prosecuted for performing a poem on German television which targeted Turkey's President Erdogan and deliberately breached the free speech rules, quote unquote. We'll be back in a short while. Please stay with us. Welcome back. So the media is most interested in who will be the first to blink in the current standoff. The German government, the satirist, or the Turkish government, or President Erdogan, who might be talking to the domestic audience at home. That's why he shows his defiance. Frank?
The comedian was already saying that he's not going to blink, so this we can put off the list. Merkel probably is not going to blink in public. Probably she's going to blink in a kind of backdoor meeting, I don't know. And for Erdogan, for President Erdogan, it will be very, very difficult actually to pull back, because he's watched by his people. And if he would pull back, then this would show that he's weaker than expected. So therefore we have a very difficult situation.
So Chancellor Angela Merkel is fighting on multiple fronts. First, after having devastating defeats in the local elections with the issue of refugees at the back of the minds of so many electorates, voters, she's also fighting for sending back more of the refugees. She's fighting for example, the human rights that the Germans hold so dear. Now, given the adversity of so many multiple challenges on the different fronts, so what do you think will be the dilemma of this German politician who became cover woman of Time magazine last year for her courage?
That's right. I think Merkel will be approved to be a practical, pragmatic politician.
She's very practical, of course.
Very practical. I think she would find a way, some way to at least to reduce the tensions between Berlin and Ankara, and try to say something which make the president of Turkey to become less angry. Frank mentioned some kind of deal, may not a direct deal, but other compromise is possible.
But the other issue,
because Turkey is so badly needed.
The other issue of great urgency is counterterrorism. Now, one after another, terrorist attacks occurred in Paris and in Brussels, claiming so many lives of innocent people. And therefore, what do you think will be the unbridled freedom of speech by Europeans to have satirical magazines, to have satirical songs, to further hurt the belief and the faith of the Muslims. I mean,
there will definitely be a discussion about it.
Yeah,
how far
this is a
we
very
should
serious
go.
discussion.
And this discussion is very, very important. And I think also this incident with these comedian shows, we probably need in Europe clearer rules to know in advance what is against the law and what is within the law. And that's in these several cases, that's probably still a very...
And let me remind you of what happened quite a few years back when satirical cartoon shows in Norway also angered Iran, the Persian state, and the manhunt was launched by the spiritual leader. Other than what do you call that? The verses by Salman Rushdie.
Rushdie.
Yeah, the verses of the Satire. I mean,
Satans.
Sentence. Yeah.
Right. I mean, that major event also angered Tehran. So, from the perspective of the Chinese, Europeans must have been licking their wounds for a long time, because they have really hurt the feelings and the faith of the Muslims.
Yes, but on the other hand, there's a strong favor of freedom of speech, even after this incident. So it's not so easy to say that the Europeans are saying, oh, now we hurt somebody, now we're going to stop it. It's very difficult. Freedom of speech is a very, very difficult thing. And it's always about how far you can go. I personally, I don't like to get a poem like President Erdogan got this poem. It's not really nice. But on the other hand, it was a comedian. So, the most important thing is that there's a debate about it. But we are not going to solve this problem. This will always be a part of freedom of speech, that there's a discussion about how far it can go.
I know Europeans as well as Americans have been wrestling with the idea that human rights and freedom of speech should be protected unconditionally. They are non-negotiable. On the other hand, don't you think there should be a code of conduct for comedians, for public figures? They must respect the limits of freedom.
But freedom of speech is not unconditionally. There are laws in Germany saying you can't offend other people. So it's not so unconditional.
For example, Mein Kampf is still forbidden.
No. Since a few
70 years expiry.
Since a few weeks, and it's on the bestseller list in Germany, actually.
Oh, really?
Yes, but
this is indeed freedom of speech.
But it's commented. It's there are comments on it, so it's people are guided through this book. But this was a discussion as well, and at the end there was a decision. Yes, we need to publish it.
So, do you think President Erdogan is likely to end up going east? For example, asking the Shanghai Cooperation Organization to accept Turkey as a full member, if not, no, currently it's an observer, but just a full membership.
He should.
I think, Turkey's best position should be actually going to between, you can go to east and also go to the west to get the best from both sides. I think that is probably the most strategic position Turkey can have. But the less, the more problems relationship become between Turkey and West Europe, more will push Turkey go to east.
Well,
but
what do you
right
think
now, except from this incident, Turkey is in a very strong position towards Europe right now because they can solve the refugee problem. So right now, actually, they're looking again, apart from this incident, they're looking again more and more towards Europe as well.
But as you already mentioned, more and more people, this whole issue becomes a test for the principle of human rights or freedom of speech, and people in the public in Europe will think, okay, Turkey is actually far away from being qualified member of the European Union. So,
what's the possibility for President Erdogan and his government to make a compromise, given the adversity of, for example, the diplomatic standoff between Moscow and Ankara following shooting down the fighter jet? Diplomatic relations were almost severed between Moscow and Ankara. This time around, President Erdogan runs the risk of being further looked down upon by the European Union on the issue of freedom of speech. So do you think he's currently in the mire? He has to make some compromise so that his image could be, the so-called image should be promoted and improved to appeal to the mind and heart of the electorate in the European Union.
Probably time will make it easier to solve the problem.
Time.
Because that's a very important thing in the media. Today, this is a big case. In 1 week, there's something else, and then it's easier to find a solution. I'm not sure if this comedian incident is really will really harm the relationship between European Union and Turkey in a very big way. It's probably showing the differences. It's probably showing the different mentality. But at the end, the refugee problem and the question of what to do with Syria and all the other big questions are so big and so important that politicians from both sides will soon spend more time again to solve these problems and to deal with this comedian.
And President Erdogan is also trying very hard to solve the issue of Kurdistan, which tries very hard to win its own independence. So do you think Ankara will have to make compromise eventually to yield to the pressure from the European Union in tackling the common challenge of refugees?
I think, as I have mentioned before, for Turkey to do something is more important. And whether the outcome will be satisfied with them is actually less important. For the president himself, I couldn't imagine he will keep silent, say whether when this thing comes out. But the outcome is actually less important.
And so, what will be the solution to the refugee problem? Currently, I'd like to know the progress, if any, that's being made, because there will soon be yet another peace talk about the political process in Damascus between the government forces and the opposition forces.
First of all, we do see that less and less refugees are coming. So this gives the European countries more space and more freedom to deal with the refugees which are already in the country. That's already a very, very big step. And now we need to see if this solution is going to last, if it's a stable solution, or if it's only a phenomena which is not very stable on the long run.
And if the European Union fails to find a solution to the refugee issue, Britain will definitely say goodbye to continental Europe in their upcoming referendum about the future. That might lie in the relationship between London and Brussels. I'll see you next time. Until then, goodbye.